In 6th century Constantinople, an Egyptian merchant was inspecting his cargo. His ship, loaded with grain, textiles, and slaves, was about to sail for Italy, Spain, and North Africa. He moved between the ports of different kingdoms, facing a bewildering variety of currencies. The crude silver coins minted by the Franks, the crooked gold pieces struck by the Goths, the dinars issued by the Arabs. But there was one currency he would accept in any port, one currency any merchant would take without hesitation. It bore the solemn image of the Byzantine emperor holding a cross and a shield. Its name was the Solidus. Welcome to Finance Traveler, where we explore the epic stories of money, power, and capital across time. This story is about a gold coin born in the early 4th century. It rose from chaos, dominated trade across the Mediterranean at its peak, and struggled for centuries through a long decline. It witnessed the central paradox of monetary history. Did the value of a gold coin come from the metal itself, or from the empire that issued it? In the 3rd century, the Roman Empire fell into a deep crisis. Civil wars broke out constantly. Barbarian tribes breached the frontiers. Military spending exploded. To pay the swollen ranks of soldiers, the emperors resorted to a seemingly simple but deadly expedient. They debased the currency. The silver content of the denarius fell below 5%. The weight of gold coins shrank as well. Hyperinflation followed. By the end of the 3rd century, the Romans no longer trusted their own money. Trade had reverted to barter. Those years of chaos taught the reformers who followed a harsh lesson. A currency without trust was nothing but scrap metal. In 284 AD, Diocletian became emperor and tried to rescue the collapsing economy. He reintroduced a gold coin called the Solidus, but the issue was too small to have much impact. The real turning point came in 312 AD, when Constantine the Great relaunched the Solidus and made it the empire's sole gold currency. More importantly, he set a strict minting standard. Each Solidus was fixed at a weight of 4.5 grams and a purity close to 100%. Constantine also decreed that every payment from the imperial treasury, soldiers' wages, officials' salaries, diplomatic gifts, had to be settled in solidi. That decision became the cornerstone of Byzantine monetary policy. From a financial perspective, Constantine's reform created a metallic monetary standard. When a gold coin is nearly pure and precisely weighed, its value comes almost entirely from the gold itself. Even if the Byzantine Empire fell tomorrow, anyone holding a Solidus would still own its weight in gold. That trustless quality was the first reason the Solidus became a true hard currency. But high purity alone was not enough. The Byzantine Empire built a sophisticated fiscal system to maintain the Solidus's long-term credibility. First, taxes had to be paid in gold, and soldiers and officials were paid in gold. That meant every subject of the empire, from Egyptian peasants to Syrian merchants, had to acquire gold coins to fulfill their obligations to the state. Gold became the thread that held the empire together. Second, the empire established a system of recoinage. Taxes pulled gold coins back from the public, and the government sent them to the mint to be melted and restruck. That mechanism ensured that coins in circulation did not lose weight through long use, preserving the uniformity of the currency. Private minting was strictly forbidden. The minting monopoly was absolute, and the state used fiscal tools to force gold back into its hands. In monetary economics, this was a fiscally driven money supply mechanism. The issuance and withdrawal of currency served the state's fiscal needs, primarily military and administrative spending. The most remarkable feature of the Solidus was its long-term stability. From 312 AD all the way into the 10th century, the Solidus remained essentially unchanged in weight, diameter, and purity. That was extremely rare in monetary history. A standard Solidus contained about 4.5 grams of nearly pure gold, roughly 96%. In the 6th and 7th centuries, a lightweight version of the Solidus appeared, mainly used for foreign trade or tribute payments. These light solidi could be identified by different marks on the coins. This precise system of weight grades reflected the strict quality control of the Byzantine mints. Every blank was weighed before striking to ensure it met the standard. Because each coin was struck by hand, every Solidus was slightly different in the force of the blow and the position of the design. That meant each Solidus was unique. Most solidi were struck at the Constantinople mint, but they were also produced in several other cities around the Mediterranean. This decentralized system of multiple mints ensured that the currency could reach every corner of the empire. The Byzantine fiscal system underwent a transformation from taxes in kind to taxes in money. In the early period, the state collected grain, horses, and fodder directly from taxpayers. But later, those taxes in kind were commuted into gold. Why did that matter? Because monetized taxation created a compulsory demand for gold. Peasants had to sell part of their produce to obtain the gold coins they needed to pay their taxes, forcing more people into the monetary economy. The monetization of military pay was equally profound. In the early period, the empire lacked enough currency and a stable monetary system to replace payments in kind. Once a stable system was in place, paying soldiers in gold had many advantages. Soldiers could buy whatever supplies they wanted and keep any surplus for their own purposes. The English word soldier itself comes from the solidus, because the solidus was a soldier's pay. When soldiers received gold instead of rations, they could buy provisions anywhere. Armies no longer depended on long supply lines. That increased mobility and greatly reduced logistical costs. The Byzantine Empire controlled the solidus with an intensity that bordered on obsession. In 537 AD, Emperor Justinian issued a new law declaring that only the emperor had the right to distribute gold. Gold belonged to the emperor. Gold belonged to the empire. The Justinian Code contained a shocking provision. Gold was not only forbidden to be given to barbarians. If barbarians were found holding Byzantine gold, it had to be recovered by any means necessary. Thereafter, if any merchant paid gold to barbarians for slaves or any other goods, he would not be fined, he would be executed. The intent of the law was clear. The gold coin was the symbol of the empire, and barbarians were not allowed to possess it. But reality was stronger than law. The obverse of the solidus usually bore a frontal or profile portrait of the emperor, wearing a crown or helmet and holding a cross or shield. The reverse often featured the goddess of victory, an angel or a cross. The legends were composed of the emperor's titles. Those images and words were not mere decoration, they were a visual declaration of imperial power. They told every person who held the coin the same message. The state behind this gold possessed unchallengeable authority. That authority was not only political, but also religious. When the image of Christ appeared on the coin, it was no longer just a medium of exchange. It became a symbol of the alliance between the empire and the divine order. Money became a vessel of faith. Despite the strictest prohibitions, the solidus flowed out of the empire in great quantities. Byzantine gold spread through diplomatic gifts. In the 6th century, the Avars who had settled on the empire's northern frontier asked to become allies, and the emperor generously gave them large sums of gold, on one occasion as much as 120,000 solidi. Byzantine gold also flowed out through tribute payments. In 561 AD, the empire concluded a 50-year peace treaty with Sasanian Persia and agreed to pay 30,000 solidi each year. But the most common channel was international trade. When Byzantine merchants imported silk, spices, and precious stones from the Middle East and the East, they had to pay in solidi. Gold thus traveled along trade routes to Central Asia, India, and even China. The archaeological discoveries are astonishing. Since the late 19th century, about 200 Byzantine gold coins and their imitations have been found in China, far more than in Central South or Southeast Asia. They have been unearthed mainly along the Silk Road. Most of these coins were found in aristocratic tombs, carefully placed in the mouth, hand, or a silk pouch on the chest of the deceased. Even more interesting, even as the Byzantine Empire tightly controlled the outflow of its gold, the barbarian kingdoms around it, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Franks, continued to use the solidus in large quantities. They even began to imitate Byzantine coins, striking their own imitations. But the obverses of those imitations still bore the portrait and titles of the Byzantine emperor, not the name of their own king. That reveals a profound truth. Even in the eyes of hostile powers, the Byzantine emperor's gold coin was still the authoritative standard for gold currency. When the Arab Empire rose, its gold dinar was actually based on the weight standard of the worn solidus. A gold coin stamped with the image of an enemy emperor could circulate freely among his enemies. That was perhaps the most successful export of the Byzantine Empire. In monetary economics, this is a classic case of an offshore currency. The credibility of the gold coin had outlasted the empire's borders. It became a brand independent of the issuer's power. When the empire's territory shrank sharply in the 7th century, the circulation of the solidus continued to expand. The empire contracted, but its currency expanded. Yet every empire falls. The legend of the solidus faded as the empire declined. Beginning in the 7th century, a series of heavy blows struck Byzantium. The rise of the Arab Empire took away the empire's richest provinces: Syria, Egypt, North Africa. Imperial territory shrank sharply. Revenue collapsed. Military pressure grew. To pay the mounting costs of war, the emperors began to tamper with their gold. In the 10th century, Emperor Nikephoros II introduced a new lightweight gold coin that circulated alongside the solidus. Real debasement began to accelerate in the mid-11th century. Within a few decades, the purity of the solidus fell from pure gold to barely 1/3 gold by the end of the 11th century. That drop, from 24 carats to less than 8 carats, was a direct symptom of fiscal distress. Territorial losses and political upheavals were closely linked to the falling purity of the coin. When the empire was in crisis, the mints had no choice but to lower the gold content of the solidus, stretching the same amount of gold into more coins. Debasement relieved fiscal pressure in the short term, but it slowly ate away the trust that the solidus had lived on for centuries. In the last 2 centuries of the empire, the situation had become desperate. The gold coin had lost more than 60% of its value. Maintaining a standing army of just 2,000 men cost about 100,000 gold coins, roughly 70% of the empire's annual revenue. Emperors were forced to cut the army again and again and to pay their mercenaries with increasingly debased coins. In 1092, Emperor Alexios I carried out a thorough monetary reform. He abolished the solidus and replaced it with a new gold coin of his own invention. The new coin remained stable in size, weight, and purity until Constantinople fell in 1204. Thereafter, the exiled successor states continued to strike debased versions of the coin until it finally became a unit of account, no longer made of gold at all. The rise and fall of the solidus bears a striking resemblance to the dominance of the US dollar today. Both rest on the same foundation: trust. The dollar's dominance today rests on 3 pillars: the economic power of the United States, its military strength, and the global acceptance of the dollar as a reserve currency. The solidus's dominance rested on the same 3 pillars: the economic power of Byzantium, its military strength, and the trust of the Mediterranean world in its gold. But there is a fundamental difference. The dollar is a fiat currency. Its value depends entirely on the credit of the US government and the global acceptance of the dollar. The solidus was a commodity currency. Part of its value came from the gold itself. That was why the solidus could retain value even as the empire declined. As long as the gold was there, the coin was not worthless. But when the Byzantine Empire began to debase its gold, it was doing exactly what the US government does today through quantitative easing, diluting the value of the currency. The difference is that dollar debasement is invisible, working through inflation, while solidus debasement was visible, working through lower gold content. When merchants in the marketplace noticed that the gold coins were turning whiter, that silver content had increased, their trust in the empire drained away. That reveals a deep law of monetary hegemony. Monetary hegemony is not won by force. It is won by institutions, by credibility, and by time. When imperial power faded, the once gleaming solidus faded with it. But when we need to understand today's dollar dominance, the international monetary system, or even the future of digital currencies, this small gold coin still offers the oldest lesson. The fall of a single gold coin reveals a profound truth about the nature of money. The solidus held its value for centuries, not only because of its gold content, but because of the strong and stable political authority of the Byzantine Empire. When the empire was strong, anyone would accept a coin stamped with the emperor's image. When the empire decayed, even the gold still in the coin could not save its credibility. That also explains why those crude imitations could circulate in the barbarian kingdoms. The images on those coins were not the faces of barbarian kings, they were the faces of Byzantine emperors. People did not trust the distant emperor, they trusted the institutions, the power, and the credibility he represented. Trust in a currency cannot be decreed. It has to be accumulated day after day through use. The Byzantine monetary system held together for nearly 700 years because it rested on a complete set of institutions: minting standards, fiscal recoinage, tax enforcement, and legal guarantees. Those institutions made the solidus the thread that connected every cell of the empire. When the empire began to debase its currency, it was collecting seigniorage, transferring wealth from every person who held a gold coin. That relieved fiscal pressure in the short term, but in the long term, it eroded the empire's most precious asset, its credibility. When Catalan mercenaries found that the silver coins they received were irregular in weight and poor in quality, they concluded that the empire was deliberately cheating them. Their resentment turned into rebellion, accelerating the collapse of the Anatolian frontier. In 1453, the Ottoman army stormed into Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire fell. The circulation of the Solidus, after more than 1100 years, finally came to an end. But the story of the Solidus did not end with the empire. Its name left a deep imprint on the monetary systems of Europe. The French currency unit, the sou, came from the Solidus. The Italian soldi and the English shilling also traced their origin to this Byzantine gold coin. The Venetian ducat and the Florentine florin both inherited the tradition of high purity and stable weight. The story of a single gold coin traces the full arc of a 1,000-year empire. From the monetary reforms of Constantine to the golden age of Justinian, to the flood of debased coins from the late imperial mints, the Solidus witnessed the transfer of power and the transformation of the medieval Mediterranean economy. It left an eternal lesson. Monetary hegemony is not won by gold, it is won by institutions, by credibility, and by time. When imperial power faded, the once gleaming Solidus faded with it. But when we need to understand the future of the dollar, of the international monetary system, or of digital currencies, this small gold coin still offers the oldest lesson of all. Subscribe to Finance Traveler. We trace the flow of capital across centuries and help you navigate the future with clarity.